is completely optional, and we will be posting it on our website. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are going to keep everyone on mute until we get to the Q&A, just to minimize background noise and feedback. Do feel free to type in a question in the chat box, as I see some folks have already done, in case you don't want to forget it, but we will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this presentation. Again, this webinar is being recorded and the slides will be uploaded to NIHB's website. So we have 3 NIHB staff on the webinar today. Myself, Brett Weber, and Robert Foley will cover the content today, and then we also have Sarah Zdunek helping with the technical side of things. Robert, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Certainly. Thank you so much, Brett. Good afternoon or morning, everybody. My name is Robert Foley. I'm the Chief Program Officer for the National Indian Health Board and the Acting Director of Public Health Policy and Programs. I do want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. And although NIHB does not often work in the space of education and in school settings, there is a distinct opportunity that's been identified here to address the intersection of education and health. And so we really do appreciate the support we've received from our funders, Indian Health Service, as well as some of our partners, including the National Indian Education Association, in launching this School Readiness Mini Grant initiative. And so, again, thank you. We look forward to sharing the information with you. We look forward to reviewing your applications, and we really, really look forward to ensuring that, our Native students just have a slightly safer environment, through which to receive their education this fall. So thank you, everybody, and I'll be talking soon, but I'm going to hand it back over to Brett.
Thank you so much, Robert. And like Robert said, I'm Brett Weber, Public Health Policy and Programs Manager here at National Indian Health Board, and I echo Robert's comments about our excitement on working with this project and working with our partners to ensure that Native students and everyone who participates in the Native education system has the tools that they need to operate safely during the COVID pandemic. So a little bit about the National Indian Health Board, for those of you who are not familiar with us. We were established by the tribes with a mission to advocate as the united voice of federally recognized American Indian and Alaska Native tribes. NIHB seeks to reinforce tribal sovereignty, strengthen tribal health systems, secure resources, and build capacity to achieve the highest level of health and well-being for our people. So the agenda for today's webinar is to first talk about the intent of this COVID Tribal School Readiness Project, which Robert already touched on, and then we'll go over the request for applications and how folks can apply, including eligibility, project funding categories, and we'll review the timeline for the RFA as well. We'll also go over next steps for the entities that we award through the Memorandum of Agreement, and then we will provide time for Q&A before we share some final resources and adjourn. The RFA can be, hold on one second. The RFA can be accessed by joining the website at www.nihb.org/COVID-19/funding-opportunities. And I got a message that the slides are not synced up. So are they, Sarah, are they on the agenda slide now?
Now it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Sarah, you might be the one to control the slides then, if you don't mind.
Yes, that's totally fine.
Sorry, everyone. I was toggling through the slides and not realizing that I wasn't bringing everyone along with me. So again, do download the RFA, the request for applications, at nihb.org/COVID-19/funding-opportunities. Next slide, please, Sarah. So the intent of this project is for tribes and tribal organizations to meet immediate needs, and emphasis on the word immediate, related to school preparation and readiness for safe operations and healthy environments during the COVID-19 pandemic. The funding for the project comes from the Indian Health Service, and federal funds come with some restrictions that we'll discuss later on. This is also a very short project period, since these funds are designed to address immediate needs for schools. Next slide, please. So if you have not had a chance to look at the request for applications, you might want to take a minute to do that now. Again, available on our website, NIHB.org. And then there's the COVID funding or the COVID panel portal that you can link to. And then there's a funding opportunities tab that the RFA is there. We'll be funding up to 15 entities, up to $2,000 each, again, through Memoranda of Agreement between NIHB and the funded entities. And as I mentioned, this is a very short project period. We hope to have the MOAs in place in early September and to have the projects complete by the end of October. So again, those really focusing on the immediate needs. So let's talk about eligibility. We want to broaden the eligible entities a little bit to best serve the Native education system. So in addition to federally recognized tribes and tribal organizations, we will consider applications from tribal schools and non-tribal schools that are located on reservations in tribal land. This does include Head Start programs. So if that's you, we would definitely encourage you to apply. And next slide, please. And if you are none of these entities, we do encourage you to apply in partnership with an eligible entity. So form a partnership with a tribe and submit an application or another eligible applicant. And applicants are welcome to apply for other NIHB funding opportunities, and applicants may currently be in receipt of other funding opportunities from National Indian Health Board. Okay, so let's dive into the meat of the project now. There are 5 categories that you may apply for under this project. In your application, choose which category or categories are best suited to your needs. There's no limit on the number of categories chosen, but keep in mind your entire application budget cannot exceed $2,000. Categories are listed on the work plan, and that's included in the application. The 5 categories are materials and equipment acquisition, facilities and infrastructure, outreach and education, training and technical assistance, and evaluation and assessment. Now we're going to talk about each category in turn and list some activities that would fit. This is not an exhaustive list by any means. So if you have activities that are not listed here, but you still think would fit under materials or equipment acquisition or any of the other categories, do be sure to include those. So for materials and equipment acquisition, some sample activities would include upgrading or purchasing personal protective equipment for school employees and or students, and that can be everything from masks to other PPE. You can also consider upgrading or purchasing screening and or testing equipment. We've seen a lot of tribes adapt touchless temperature checking equipment. That might be something that your school needs. We also heard in a consultation with the Bureau of Indian Education that they hosted with tribes that additional busing capacity was a real need because the buses couldn't accommodate so many students, so they had to increase the number of buses that were operating. And so maybe some activities to support additional busing capacity in some way, of course, keeping in mind the $2,000 budget cap. Another possible would be purchasing and distributing virtual learning hardware, and that can include Wi-Fi hotspots, tablets, and or laptops, or purchasing disinfecting technology and other equipment. So the second category, facilities and infrastructure, some sample activities, again, not being an exhaustive list, but just some sample activities that you might want to think about in your application. Upgrading or purchasing hardware and materials to protect school employees and students. We see a lot of schools have looked at maybe having a screen between the teachers and the students. So that might be something that we would qualify as hardware. And then also perhaps developing and implementing a facilities cleaning process with new and or existing staff. So if you need to develop a cleaning plan for your facility, then that's something that we can support the development of and the implementation of. And then also purchasing or renting temporary additional space for school-related functions. So if you want to do physical distancing and need the students to space out a little bit more and you need to rent maybe a trailer or if you have outdoor seating and you need like a canopy or something, that's something that we can definitely For the third category, education and outreach, some sample activities might be marketing of school readiness plans to community members, so making sure that parents and students and everyone else knows the steps that your school is taking to ensure the safety of faculty, school staff, and students. And then as well as purchasing and distributing materials related to physical, mental, and cultural health during COVID for students and school employees. And we've heard especially that cultural health is something that is really getting overlooked, and that we want to make sure that tribes have the ability to prioritize cultural health in the space of safe learning environments for students during COVID. For training and technical assistance, some sample activities might include training for school employees on how to use protective equipment and or that hardware that I mentioned earlier. Training for school employees on how to use screening equipment. And screening equipment I want to mention, of course, is that sort of screening for the symptoms of COVID, whether that's a fever, so you would have like a touchless thermometer. Training a school employee on how to use that. That's not the same thing as diagnostic equipment. That is something that should be done by a medical professional. So we want to emphasize that maybe training would be best for screening equipment and not necessarily diagnostic equipment for school employees. Training for school faculty on effective distance learning techniques, including cultural activities, again, prioritizing cultural health and cultural cohesiveness during this time, or perhaps developing and disseminating a school quarantine or closure plan so that, if certain conditions are met, then the school has to shut down, and having those plans already in place and supporting the development and dissemination of those plans might be something that your school has identified as a need. And finally, for the last category, evaluation and assessment, some sample activities include conducting a school community assessment. So that is working with especially parents and students and everyone involved with the school in the community in conducting an assessment. And then also perhaps evaluating the school readiness level, whether you need to make the difficult decision of, can we teach in person? Does it have to be virtual? Can we do some sort of mix? What's the best sort of path forward for our school? If you want to conduct an evaluation for that, that is something that we can support. Next slide, please. So to apply, please submit a completed application package by August 28th. That includes an application, preferably online, and the link to that is in the RFA. And then we also need 3 uploaded documents. A work plan, which we'll go over that template later on in this presentation, a recent audit letter, and a signed letter of support from a tribal official. And we'll go over again who that letter can be from, because we want to make it fairly flexible. So next slide, please. So to fill out the application, please go to that link included in the RFA and fill out a bit of information, including contact information for who should receive notification of the application decision, so basically who we talk to, and then who will be actually coordinating the project and the project activities. And that sometimes that may be the same person, sometimes that may be 2 different people. Be sure to also note the payee and where NIHB would send the check should we decide to award the application. We have some demographic questions about the tribe, including the number of individuals who will be impacted by the funding project. And then we ask you to complete 2 project narrative questions, which I'll talk about in just 1 second. You have to fill out a budget and then upload those 3 documents that I mentioned, the work plan, the audit, and the letter of support. So for the 2 project narrative questions, there is a space limit of 1,500 characters, which translates to about 250 words. So not looking for a lot of information or detail, but we do want to have just a very brief project narrative describing the tribe's current experience with and need for school readiness support. So that's sort of the first question. And then the second is also use the project description to describe how funds will be used. So the activities that you'll conduct in addition to the first question. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert to talk a little bit about the budget. And then we will, once Robert's done, we will have some question and answer time. So again, just a quick reminder, if you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat box, or we can do the Q&A when Robert's finished going over the review of the RFA.
Okay, so I get to talk about the budget, and that's where I'm going to start. And whereas we're not necessarily looking on scoring the application per the budget, we, as federal recipients of dollars, also have some restrictions in the budgeting that we need to comply with. So that's where I'm going to start. This funding may not be used for indirect costs. So we ask that all funding be directed to direct costs. So if you have an overhead cost, a G&A percentage, or an indirect cost, or whatever your tribe or organization or school calls it, unfortunately, we will not be allowing those to be included in your budget. And basically, that's because this is for so small a dollar amount, $2,000, and we would like to see that be used as much as we can for direct services or materials. The funds will not be used for lobbying. Unfortunately, cannot be used for the purchase of food either, and cannot be used for any major construction. Not that $2,000 will go very far in the course of major construction, but it cannot also be used as an element or to contribute to major construction projects. Funding can be used for staff, like wages and salaries, and that's just fine. Equipment. Now, generally equipment costs more than $5,000, and that's what defines something as a piece of equipment. So you could use this $2,000 as an element of an equipment you might be purchasing, things such as like air filtration units or something to that effect, or portable air conditioning units, things of that nature. Supplies, training costs. So that might be online training for individuals. It might be sending people to other trainings, bringing someone in to do some manner of training. Advertising is part of and marketing is part of your outreach and education efforts. Facilities improvements, if that is purchasing additional guards to place between desks or chairs or at counter spaces, or to do something to the gymnasium or the cafeteria, anything of that nature. Consultants, we already talked about outreach and education a little bit. And I think it's important to note that that can be used to support you communicating with families, parents, care providers, or tribal leaders as well. Consultants, if you would like to bring in a consultant for any one of these activities, feel free. Funds can be used to support that. And printing. If you have any additional questions about what funding can be used for, that's definitely something we'll be ready to entertain during the Q&A. We acknowledge that that's generally where a lot of people have questions when it comes to these mini grants. Okay, next slide. We are asking that you prepare a very, very brief budget to submit with your application. This is not a budget narrative. We just want a line item breakdown of where you're going to be proposing to spend the money. So those line items include wages and salaries and fringe benefits, contractual costs, and that's going to be contractors and consultants will be wrapped up into that single line item. Supplies. So what are you going to be purchasing? Equipment. Equipments are larger purchases. Okay, so if you're going to be using this $2,000 as an element of a larger purchase of equipment, then that's where you're going to budget that. Training, and that training expenses can be, if you have to rent a facility, if you have to pay for a trainer, things of that nature, or even if you need specialized training equipment or curricular equipment, you can put that there. Then other direct costs. This might be where you have some of your facilities improvements, might be where you have some of your printing, outreach and education. You might have some things in there as well. And it is noted here the budget is up to $2,000. You do not have to apply for the full $2,000 if you do not wish. All right, so you have anything up to $2,000. And as a reminder, please enter only whole numbers and do not enter any commas, decimal points, or even dollar points, dollar signs. We don't need any of those characters. Okay, next slide. So Brett already covered some of this, and so this is just a reminder that you will actually have 3 separate documents that you'll need to upload into that SurveyMonkey application. That is the work plan, and I'm going to cover that in just a little bit, and a letter of support from a tribal official, and documentation of the most recent financial audit. So, and I'm going to be going through those 3 elements next. Next slide. The work plan, and here is the link to the work plan. We are providing you with a template and asking that you complete the template for the work and activities that you're proposing, and then upload that into the SurveyMonkey. The link to the work plan is located here. We can also put that link into the chat box so you can cut and paste and save that. But know that this link will take you to NIHB's COVID Tribal Resource Center. And from there, you can see the School Readiness RFA mini grant opportunity. And from there, that's where you can actually download the template for the work plan. All right, next slide. As far as the work plan, we don't want people to stress out about filling this out. So we're providing some very concrete instructions on how to do this. We ask that you only complete the section of the work plans for which you're applying for. So out of the categories that Brett covered, you only need to find the work plan element that aligns with that particular category and just complete that part. All right, leave everything else blank. The objectives, we're asking that you write in the SMART format, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. And the outcomes that we're asking for in relation to those objectives are just anything that's going to be achieved by that particular objective. What's going to be gained? What's going to change? How will the community, the students, the school be impacted? Then, dare I say, the most important components of the work plan are the activities. We ask that you list 1 specific activity per row and only list the activities that you are going to be doing, that you need to do, and that you're going to use the $2,000 to achieve. If you need any more rows, you can add them as necessary. And you also don't need to use all 3 rows that are there. It's important to note that an activity is just a verb. Just one thing that you're going to do is that you're going to construct dividers or separators between desks. Is it you are going to rent an additional transportation van? Things of that nature comprise viable activities. We want to know the deadline, so when that activity is going to be completed. And then we do want to know what tangible product is going to emerge as a result of the completion of that activities. So things such as cell phones, training, software packages, the number of letters sent out, things of that nature. Next slide. We do need a letter of support from a tribal official. Now, in this case, who comprises a tribal official may vary as we have different systems working together. So it does need to be an official tribal letterhead, and who comprises a tribal official might be the tribal health department director or CEO, could be the chair of the health committee, it could be the tribal chairman, or it could be any tribal official that oversees all or a portion of the educational, public health, or environmental health activities at the tribal level. It is important that it be on letterhead, that it be correctly dated, and that the title of the individual signing it is noted in their signature line. That's an important element that we didn't put on this particular PowerPoint, but the title of the person signing that letter needs to be noted in their signature line. Next slide. Since we are using federal dollars to support this mini grant opportunity, we do need to do our due diligence as required by law, and that is ensuring that the mini grants that we are providing to tribes and tribal schools will be of low risk. And so in order to do that, we ask that each applicant submit documentation of their most recent financial audit. Now, we are not asking for all financial statements from the tribe. What we need are some examples listed here on the slide. Our letter to your tribal governance, or just a schedule of the findings. And those are just separate PDFs that tend to exist as part of a larger audit package. And they're, just 3 to 4 or 5 pages at the most. And really what we just need is a statement from the auditors basically saying that there were no significant findings and that this entity does not pose a risk, that they will spend the monies and they have the system to spend the monies as appropriate and required. Next slide. If you have any questions about the process of completing the application form, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address, as it appears on the screen, is rfoley@nihb.org. So rfoley@nihb.org. So if you're struggling with the SurveyMonkey and the online element, let us know. If it's uploading the documents, let us know. If you have any questions about the content of the document, such as the work plan or what comprises a valid letter from a tribal official, let us know. Please reach out to us. You do have the option to complete a paper copy and submit by email. If that is what you would like to do, please let us know as soon as possible so we can plan for that. And look for that in the mail, in the email. Next slide. The funding mechanism that NIHB is using to award these funds is an MOA with funds attached. So we are using a Memorandum of Agreement with funds attached. The Memorandum of Agreement will include the agreed upon work plan. So that will be the work plan that you submit within your application. If there are any edits to that work plan, then we will work with you before we sign it, the MOA. But that MOA will comprise a significant element of that MOA. That work plan will comprise a significant element of the MOA. The MOA will spell out roles and responsibilities of both NIHB and the recipient. Some of the things you'll see that will be delineated as bullet points within the MOA will include requiring that all subawardees allow NIHB to share project successes and lessons learned, that the awardee will participate in the evaluation activities, which I will say will be minimal, but we do want the opportunity to collect information from you, how things are going, your successes, or any challenges you might have had. And all of that will be an element of the final report that we will ask to be completed and submitted by October, as well as financial statement that just says that you have spent the money in accordance with the budget. NIHB, on the flip side, will provide selected awardees with the specified amount of dollars and any technical assistance or guidance that we can as requested from the subawardee. Next slide. This is the proposed timeline. The RFA was released on August 7th, and we're holding the pre-application webinar today, of course. Applications are due 10 days from now. So the applications are due next week on August 28th. There will be a quick turnaround on the review, and we will have notifications out to those that we select by October 31st. We will notify those that were not selected as well, but we do ask for some grace in that, as if somebody that is selected and notified ends up turning down the actual award, then we will move to the next person. So we will notify those selected first, and then notify those who have not been selected second. Those notifications will be sent by email. We do ask that you respond as quickly as you possibly can, confirming that you accept the award. Then we will work very quickly to get signed MOAs, signed and countersigned MOAs, and disperse those funds. We do want to get those funds out into the hands of the tribes and the schools as soon as possible so that they can use them as soon as possible. We know that school districts and tribes are working on a number of different deadlines when it comes to school reopening. So we know that even just $2,000 can make a difference. We want to get that into your hands as soon as possible. Then October 31st is the deadline for completed activities. And so that is also the deadline which we have for final reports from the tribes and the schools, as well as the final financial report. And the slide says that we'll accept those up to November 13th. I will say we'll accept them anytime before as well. So if you know exactly what you're going to do with it and you've going to turn around and spend that within 2 weeks, feel free just to complete the final report and submit that whenever you're done and ready. Next slide. So now is the opportunity, as Brett mentioned before I began speaking, for question and answers. And again, you can use the chat box to type in your question. If you would like to verbally ask it, you can also put that in the chat box as well, and we can unmute your lines individually. So with that, Brett, do you have any other comments before we entertain the questions in the chat box?
No, just that this is a very exciting opportunity, and I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to support folks working in this space to ensure that the Native education system is able to operate as safely as possible. So I do think we have a couple of questions in the chat that I'll go ahead and read if that's okay with you, Robert.
Yes, it is.
Sure. So we have a question from Mary Johnson who says, in the SurveyMonkey application for number 13, supplies and equipment, which is all that I'm asking for, I go to submit and it will not submit, and it highlights the wages and salary box. She's tried putting 0 and leaving blank, but it won't submit a proposed budget under wages and salaries. Need help on this. So if you have questions like that, we'll have to do some troubleshooting on the SurveyMonkey link. So feel free to reach out to either myself or Robert if you're having trouble with that SurveyMonkey application, and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Sarah, could you toggle to the slide that has our contact info on it?
Mary, it may very well be a case that we, put that as a mandatory completed field in SurveyMonkey when it doesn't really need to be. So we will work with that.
Sarah, sorry, it's actually at the end of the webinar slides. So if you do have trouble submitting the application, do reach out to either myself or Robert. You are able to submit the application with a Word document that we can send out if the SurveyMonkey gives you too much trouble. We do prefer to collect them through the SurveyMonkey app so that they're all in one place, but if you do need a Word document, we can definitely do that. So the next question is, can funds purchase supplies directly given to tribal students? That's a question from a tribal government applicant, Robert.
The answer is yes. Yes, if you are seeking to purchase things such as like tablets, or even laptops, yes, you can purchase things that will be distributed directly to the students.
And then another question from the same person, could funds be used to buy supplies for a non-tribal school not on trust land? There are many tribal members that go to that school.
Unfortunately, that's not what this particular funding stream has been earmarked for. So certainly I acknowledge that when it comes to education, doesn't follow geographic or reservation boundaries. I do want to acknowledge that. But unfortunately, this funding stream is for tribal school systems that do exist on trust land, within tribal jurisdictional land, and reservation boundaries.
And just a reminder, for entities that are not eligible, they are encouraged to partner with an eligible entity for submitting an application in partnership with an eligible entity. So again, if you do have a question in the chat box, or if you do have a question, please write it in the chat box. Or if you prefer to speak, you can use the raise your hand function and we can unmute you. So a question from Amber Yazzie says, for school districts, can school administrators, for example, the superintendent, be a valid letter of support for the tribal official?
If it's the school that is applying and it's a tribal school, the answer will be yes. If that makes sense. So, but I will say if the tribe is applying as a whole, then yeah, and the subawardee applicant will be the tribe as a whole, then I would ask that a tribal official be the signatory on the letter. However, if it is the school itself or the school district itself that is applying, then the superintendent is indeed a valid official.
Okay, and then we have one more question from Lisa Wade. I submitted a request for a swing set to encourage individual play and social distancing. Is that an allowable expense? We have staff to construct it. We would just need to purchase the swing set.
That is an allowable expense, yes.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the point I made earlier that when we think about health in the education sense, that's not just medical health, right? That's cultural health, that's mental health, and you know, I think having a safe play environment is integral to that maintaining that health. So I think that is definitely something that we could consider for this funding opportunity. Okay,
Brett,
so I don't.
Do you see, Brett, there is a question in the chat. I think we have. I'm not seeing the same chat you are, so I'm going to read this question. The case from K Sunrum. It says, we are the tribal Head Start that provides school readiness to our area reservation schools. We serve 3 to 5-year-olds in a center-based environment. Our service center for Minnesota can either be virtual, hybrid, or brick mortar per the requirements of our Minnesota governor. Are we eligible for applying? The answer is yes, you are eligible to apply. And tribal Head Start programs are eligible to apply for funding under this opportunity. And I do see people have been entering questions in either the chat box or the Q&A box, and we're monitoring them both, so please feel free to use either one.
Okay, and then we have one more question in the Q&A box. So when a tribal government applies without a school, then they can utilize this grant for their own education department's projects to assist tribal students, whether they're attending school on or off the res. Is that the case?
Give me 1 second to think about that. I'm going to read it again. So when a tribal government applies without a school, then they can utilize this grant for their own education department's projects to assist tribal students, whether they are attending school on or off the reservation. I'm going to say yes to that. Because what I'm envisioning are a variety of different youth educational opportunities that exist outside of a school setting. And so if we're talking about kind of the broader education readiness to serve youth, then certainly I think there's opportunities here to provide funding to support that. So I would say to whoever, and I can't say exactly, Aaron, who wrote that question, I would say yes to go ahead and apply to support your tribal education program. I would say, though, Aaron, I think it's going to be important in your application to highlight the tribal youth, the tribal youth citizens that will benefit from your proposed project. I think that would be an important element to communicate to NIHB and the reviewers the impact that this will have on the tribal community and the tribal youth. And you're welcome, Aaron.
I actually have one more question in my chat box.
Mm-hmm.
And it's from Joseph Laframboise. It says, could we supplement current programs?
Yes. Yes, you can use these funds to supplement existing or current programs. This does not need to be original programming.
Thank you, Robert, for bringing this to us. I just had my mom. She's a leftover from yesterday.
And then we also have a question. Can this presentation be emailed so we may have a copy to refer to? I'm happy to do that. I think there is a function in WebEx where we can see the email addresses for the folks who attended. So I'm happy to send out the slides for this later on, as well as post them to NIHB's website, again, with that in the same place where the requests for applications are listed. Okay, and I do not see any other questions in either the chat box or the Q&A box. And I don't see that anyone has their hand raised.
I have one more.
Okay.
It says, SurveyMonkey asks for total tribal enrollment. We are a small tribal school, so we insert the total number of students enrolled. This is from Robin Harding. Do you want me to repeat that?
No, I think really the question is what number should be entered into that field. And we are looking for the total number of tribal enrollment, not necessarily the youth enrollment of the school. And the size of the tribe, I will say the size of the tribe will have no bearing necessarily on the funding decision. So large tribes versus small tribes will be equally and equitably weighted out in our funding decisions. But we just, for the sake of our own evaluation, just want to be able to track impact. And that's the purpose for that. So I would ask that everybody complete that field with their total tribal enrollment or best guess, I will say. If you can't access that information quickly or easily, then give us your best informed guess. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in on the chat or the Q&A that I can see. Brett, Sarah, do you see any more questions or comments?
No, I think we got them all.
Yes, I don't have any other questions.
Well then, Brett, I will turn this back over to you to close out, but I will just remind everybody that here is the contact information, phone numbers, and email addresses for both Brett and myself. We're happy to help in any way that we can as you seek to complete this. We will, as Brett mentioned, work out any bugs in the SurveyMonkey application form. And again, thank you all for taking the time to join us, taking the time to explore if this opportunity is great, is right for you, your school, your tribe, and your youth, your families. And I just also want to say, especially to those out there that are serving in leadership roles, serving in administrative roles, serving as educators, and serving in the school systems, thank you. Thank you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And let us know how we can support you in these unprecedented and truly unique times. So, thank you for the work that you're doing. Brett?
Yes, and I completely echo Robert's comments, and we really want to be as much of a good partner in this space as we can. And I really, based on this feedback, it seems like the funding is going to go to some really worthy causes and really going to be able to support everyone involved with the Native education system. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up this webinar. And again, do reach out to either myself or Robert with any questions. And do be sure to download the request for applications off of the NIHB website. Thank you so much for your time today, and have a good rest of your day.